Welcome to Community Solutions Podcast. This is the first episode, and I am Jason Bradley. And then, even though you can't see it, over to my right, weighing in at,
171 pounds.
From parts unknown.
On my left side. Oh, Andrew Richter here. Of course, I'm here. Community Solutions. Who else would be here but us two?
That's right.
I mean, we give you the local news you're not going to find in the Sun Post. You're not going to find at your city council meeting. We analyze what's going on. We do the media's job for them.
Well, somebody's got to do it.
It's a dirty job. And we take a lot of BS from certain quarters, but that's okay. It doesn't bother me at all.
No, not one bit. So, here we are, first episode, and why should you care? Why should you listen? I mean, that's kind of the premise. Here we are, like
Well, we're the best two people on talk radio already. That's why you should listen, shouldn't it? No.
That's quite a claim to live up to. But, seriously, why should you care? If we're talking about Eden Prairie and you live in Maple Grove, why should you care? And that's the problem with local politics. Most people tune it out and it's like, oh, that's happening over there. But I'm here to tell you that you should pay attention. If we say Landfall, Minnesota, if you're in White Bear Lake, you really should just be putting the name of your city in whenever we talk about another one. Because what is happening from the Met Council to your county boards, they're really handing down marching orders to their city council saying, hey, here's the way that we want things organized. Here's how we want things built. And it's up to you to be able to keep track of those things. But because there's so little coverage, it's really difficult to do. So, again, that's kind of why we're here, to be able to uncover those things as they happen in the various cities across Minnesota, at least at this point only Minnesota. But I can guarantee you that it's happening across the state. And if you did the research and went and found those things for yourself, you'd find the same thing we did.
Yeah, there's no question about it that if you look at things that we do, budgets, comprehensive plans, city charters, local government aid, grant money that comes down, all these cities, I mean, we've looked at countless, and by the way, your comprehensive plan, we should mention, just to get back to the basics, every city, pretty much in the state, but the ones underneath the Met Council umbrella, there's 189, they have to have a comprehensive plan every 10 years. They have to update it once a year, and they submit it to Minnesota's Politburo, the Met Council, as basically the Met Council is the lord and master of it. And you can go to your city's website. I'm sure it's there. Some of them you might have to hunt for. They're not always right out front. Some of them, like New Hope, New Hope's 2030 plan is, and that's based on the year 2030, is pretty out front and center. But if you go and you click on it, might be called the master plan, might be called the comprehensive plan, it might be called the 2030 plan.
Redevelopment plan?
Absolutely. And they are remarkably similar throughout the entire state of Minnesota. It really is amazing how they can define smart growth, transit-oriented development, walkable communities, certain kinds of housing, the same everywhere. It's incredible how... and yet, we're the nutcases for pointing this out. Yeah. It's like if we point this out, oh, come on, Bradley, Richter, you're conspiracy theorists, go watch what's the Jesse Ventura show?
Conspiracy theory,
Conspiracy
right?
theory, yeah. I've seen things that'll blow your mind. But, I mean, how is it that all these cities have the same goals, closely anyway?
Well, I mean, if you think that we're of the kind of crazy mindset, think about the game telephone, right? You get 10 people around in a circle, you whisper in the next person's ear a story, and by the time it gets back to you, it's totally changed. How many cities are there in Minnesota?
Oh, 900?
Oh, 900. So you're telling me that story shouldn't drastically change by the time we get to number 900? When you put 10 people in a circle, a story can't stay the same, but yet they use the same phrases, they use the same concepts.
Buzzwords. It really is amazing, and it just goes to show the level of top-down planning that goes on. And I hate to say this is going to sound bad for me to say this, but there are a lot of people in local government who aren't too bright, maybe is the right word. They don't do a lot of research. You know, one of the things, too, is these things come in nice, shiny packages. You get somebody from the Met Council with all the benefits of transit-oriented development, for example. You will not get anything critical about it. Your city staff will be sent to workshops that are put on by the Met Council, by the state of Minnesota, by the Environmental Protection Agency. They will not hear a word critical of anything that is in those little booklets that they get. They have local government toolkits, and you get a very one-sided view of something. So it's not a surprise then that all of these things, and it's also how they get grant money. I mean, you don't get money. State and federal money always comes with strings. Always, always, always. The Met Council's great about this. They have the Tax-Based Revitalization Act, which requires a private-public partnership. Now, what that is a corporation getting in bed with government and getting special favors, which is, of course, not fair to the other businesses. We've seen it with Surly Brewing Company.
Yes, we have.
Which over here, cleaning up a site. Now, you might say, well, what's wrong with cleaning up a site? Well, nothing. But why are we giving special favors to one business and not to another? You're interrupting it's not the free market when you do things like that.
Right. Well, look at what happened in Robbinsdale, where you have Travail, and they got all this money from Robbinsdale, the city of Robbinsdale, to relocate their business so that they stayed in Robbinsdale. And sure, we heard all about, the landlords were so unfair and this and that. Well, if you don't like it and you're just an individual, say you own a home or you're renting a home and you don't like the landlord, if you're renting a home, you move to another place, and it's all on you to do that. You don't get subsidized to do that. That is an individual's prerogative to move. And with a business, it's the individual owner's prerogative to move the location of his business and assume those costs. And Robbinsdale Pet and Farm and Garden Supply did not get those same perks because that's where they wanted to run the light rail. And they were more than happy to not give any money to help that business succeed.
And I'll say something too. Part of this is on business. I mean, this idea that some businesses have found it advantageous, and it's always the bigger companies. It's always the companies with the lobbyists and the accountants and the lawyers who run to government with their hands out, make threats, things of that nature, to game the system. I mean, we've talked about it before on television, but a company like General Electric, I'm going to the federal level, but they were all into the green subsidies. Their CEO was on the President's Jobs Council. At the same time, they owned a TV network, which is they don't anymore, but it was a total conflict of interest. And they ended up paying zero in federal income taxes. Now, where are the people complaining about certain people paying their fair share? Why is it that Johnny's Electric Company, how are they ever going to get off the ground if GE has gone out and gamed the system? And of course, you bring it back to a local level. We dealt with it in Crystal with the medical center moving that got a lot of special treatment to move.
Yes, they did.
And of course, it's empty where they were, so I don't see how that is a net plus for the city. And it certainly isn't not a net plus for this neighborhood. But we all know the impetus behind it. It was transit coming on 81, and it's TOD, and it fills one of their land use policies in their comprehensive plan. The Crystal has 23 land use policies. That was number 2 or 3, developing that at the northeast corner of that.
Yes, I believe it was 3. But I mean, Crystal hasn't changed their comprehensive plan. I mean, they've changed it some, but I mean, despite, you go and you talk to them, hey, you still got the airport in there. Hey, you're looking at tearing this whole area down around the from Bass Lake Road over to
Almost to Target.
Broadway. Yeah. And oh no, we can't afford that. But well, then why do you continue to place it in your plan?
Well, I can tell you what they told me. They told me that it was all, I don't know that I believe this, but that it was all based on what might happen by the year 2030. But to me, when you put it in a plan and you approve it, it tells me you're going to create the conditions to make it happen. It's like Crystal has in their comprehensive plan, they want 75% property ownership, 25% renting. Now, they state that as a goal.
Yes.
Now, if you're going to state something as a goal, now look, there are market conditions that can cause that. The housing bubble caused
Right.
more renting naturally. It wasn't, well, the government had a hand in it,
Yeah.
but I mean, that cycles, and that's just a normal business cycle that goes through. But when you state as a goal that you are going to increase renting, it tells me that you are going to create those circumstances, whether that's putting up more apartment buildings, whether that's handing out more renting licenses, which they can do. They can limit that
Yeah.
in the city code if they want to. I mean, I'm not suggesting they should. I'm just saying they can. It tells me that they're going to make that happen.
And I have yet to see a city in Minnesota that has decreased the number of rentals that it's proposing between now and the year 2030. Every place that I have looked into has shown an increase. And we're not talking places just in the metro. We're talking places like Hutchinson, Minnesota.
Independence?
Independence, which currently has 0, and they want 61 by the year 2030. 61 units. And I tell you, nobody lives out in Independence that doesn't want a little room, a little land. But what that's going to do is allow the Metro Transit to come in, because they are technically part of Hennepin County, but they're outside of the Met Council taxing district. That will, if there are high density housing units out there, create a need for transit, which will then create the ability to tax because they are using your services at that point.
Yeah, you know, and I don't know that there's a, quote, need for transit that the private sector couldn't provide. I mean, you know, this is the thing. If transit, and I know we're going off in another subject here, but transit is just kind of one of those things that gets my blood boiling here. If transit really is, if something really is in demand, the private sector will find a way at some point to supply it.
Yes.
You know, if 60-inch TVs were not being bought by somebody, nobody tried to sell them.
Right.
So when transit is, when it's attempted to be sort of forced down your throat, that tells me that there isn't demand for it, but that the government will create the circumstances to create that demand. For example, subsidizing land around public transit, transit-oriented development. Now, if it was desirable to have TOD, transit-oriented development, you'd never need to subsidize land.
That's correct.
Why would you have to do that?
There would be bidding wars over that land.
And the price of that land would skyrocket.
Yes.
But instead, we've got to incentivize people.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. Okay, I'll go off on a little tangent about Hiawatha. Hiawatha from downtown Minneapolis to the Mall of America. Okay, that line loses $18 million every year just in operating costs. Now, that's not including the subsidies. That's not including TOD. That's public-private capital costs. None of that's included because they all have separate budgets, and maybe we'll get into that later. Maybe we won't. And if we can't make a profit or break even or whatever going from downtown of the biggest city in Minnesota,
Right.
you know, where Target Center is, Target Field is,
Yep.
downtown, going to maybe our biggest, site,
Mall of America.
right, Mall of America, our biggest attraction, shall we say.
And don't forget all the tourists that fly in
Right.
using the airport. I mean, the light rail goes through the airport as
goes
well.
right downtown. I
Yeah.
mean, but and if we can't make money on that, what makes anyone think we're going to not lose more money on something like Bottineau, Gateway, Southwest? I mean, nobody's flying into the airport and then going to take light rail down to Eden Prairie or Brooklyn Park. I mean, who's going to do that? Mm-hmm. So, again, that just tells us. But when you look again at these, bring it back to comprehensive plans, they will all say the same thing. They want walkable, which is useless 6 months out of the year in Minnesota. Anyway, stuff within half a mile, mixed use, that kind of thing. Yep. And my problem with, I have a lot of problems with it, but the big problem is, like I said, if that were desirable, we wouldn't have to put it in a plan. It would happen.
That's right. And it's that organic growth. I'm not necessarily against rail if that's the way that people wanted to get around, and it was something that was an organic thought, but it's this total mindset from the Met Council and the county boards that are behind it, pushing it and saying, hey, this is what we need, because the population is going to grow around the metro between now and 2030, and now we're starting to look into 2040. And the truth is, we have lost population to the point where we almost lost a congressional seat last time that they did the census.
Which is too bad, because they can take Keith Ellison anytime they want to. But the thing is, though, you think back in American history, why did rail leave us as a primary? 150 years ago, okay, rail was the fastest way to get from point A to point B. Now, what happened that rail did not become that? What happened was we had entrepreneurs, business people come by, they took risks, they made investments. It wasn't, Henry Ford didn't invent the assembly line because he got a grant from Hennepin County. And the Wright brothers did not invent flying because they got a tax deduction. They were entrepreneurs who took chances, who saw the future and said, you know what, rail is good, but there's no railroad between here and here. I have to go from here and here, and then how do I get, how do I get from, I can go from A to B, but I can't go from A to C.
Well, and that's the thing. We used to have our light rail line that went from Excelsior all the way out to Woodbury. And for a while it was profitable. But then around the turn of the century, like you're saying, the whole assembly line to make cars more affordable for the individual person, and the federal government subsidies that came in and really mucked things up with those light rail lines. Between the two of those things, it just became unprofitable and unfeasible to run that kind of a line anymore. And people really got to a point where they loved their cars.
Yeah. Well, your car is a symbol of your freedom and independence. And some people would disagree with me on that, but I always go back to, think about if you didn't have your car. Okay? Think about, how would you get to your lake cabin? How would you maybe even get to work? How would you get to go visit the nieces and nephews or whatever? Your car's taken away. A lot of your freedom is taken away. And ultimately, one of the goals of these plans is to reduce VMT, vehicle miles traveled. They openly say it, that they want. Now, look, again, to me, and this is just to me, the market takes care of that, because how many people in the last 10 years have bought a more fuel-efficient car? I know I have.
Yeah?
I know families that have gone from, say, 3 cars to 2 cars. People have adjusted based on the price of gas. I know I have.
Yes.
I'm making less trips up north. I wanted to buy a truck so bad I could just taste it, but I couldn't justify 12 miles to the gallon, or whatever it was. This is years ago, but it was a factor, and that is the free market working. That it's not. I don't need the Met Council manipulating how I get, and it also brings up a question of, and I brought this up to you and I live in Crystal, and I brought this up. How much should be planned and how much shouldn't be? Is it really the Met Council's domain to put out a number of housing units? Doesn't that go above and beyond what they were designed to do, which is coordinate regional planning?
And specifically, I mean, sewers,
Right.
basically. And they were given more power and given more power through legislative action.
That's right. The legislature has been derelict in their duty.
Yep. And so we've gotten to a point where Met Council has its fingers in everything.
Yeah.
And we really need to step back from that and take a look and say, hey, is this really the Met Council's function? And if not, how can we as cities stand up to the Met Council and say, hey, what they're asking us to do does not work for our city. Our city is not some cookie cutter, that along with every other metro city where we've got to have X number of bus stops or light rail stations per 1,000 people capita, and that kind of stuff is just ridiculous.
Right.
I mean,
we're not a dot on a board.
Mm-hmm.
We're people who are trying to live their lives. And you mentioned what can be done. Well, there are things that can be done. Number one, you don't take their money.
Exactly.
You don't take their livable communities grant. You don't take their tax-based revitalization account. You don't take their money. They can't tell you what to build. Number two, I think that we have got to, when it comes to comprehensive planning, somebody's got to take the Met Council to court.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I don't think the judiciary should be the end, I don't think that's what the judiciary was set up to do. And unfortunately, it's morphed into judges are really deciding things. But there really has never been a test case on their authority.
Yep, and because it's so hard to do, I mean, it's expensive. If you're one city, to justify taking your taxpayers' money and going to court with it, there's no reason that you can't have a class action lawsuit where you take all of the cities in the metro. I mean, if you were able to get your city councils to a place where they were friendly to that kind of idea and pool the money together, I think that's a better way to go about it.
It probably is. I think, unfortunately, we have so many cities that either are ideologically in bed with the Met Council. And, I'd like to ask the question, too, where's the League of Minnesota Cities in this? Where's a group like that? I mean, they whine and moan and gripe about anything the state government does, the most trivial thing. And they complain. At the Met Council, they're dead silent on it.
Dead silent on redevelopment, yeah.
Right, but I mean, why is it okay for the Met Council to tell a city to do something, but it's not okay for the state? What's the difference? They're both the one's an 800-pound gorilla, the other's an 1,000-pound gorilla. And where are our advocates? These people who supposedly believe in the government working from the bottom. I mean, maybe that's where cities need to. I mean, I don't really believe in the League of Minnesota Cities. I think they're useless. But there are some groups. There's Metro Mayors Associations. There's other. You could form a partnership to do that.
Yeah.
Say, hey, all these cities along here don't want what you're planning, disagree with your numbers.
Yep.
So we're going to, challenge that. And so I think there are ways to get around it. And I think the bigger thing, too, is our governor and our legislators need to get off their arses and take back their constitutional authority to make law. Because what the Met Council is doing, they're making law.
Yes.
I mean, which is not what they're supposed to do.
No, and I mean, theoretically, if they're making law, that goes against the Minnesota Constitution explicitly. And as a city, you would have the right to tell them to go take a hike.
Yeah.
And they've been given powers by the legislature, and those powers, A, need to be reined in, but B, the cities have to get a backbone and stand up and say, hey, that's not within your constitutional powers, and you're not going to push us around.
Yeah, and maybe, where are cities testifying in St. Paul? I mean, I don't see city officials going to committee hearings talking about this, and, you'll hear individuals do it, but you won't see a group of cities go and say, look, these numbers that they're forecasting are absurd. There's no way we can meet them. But it's there to push the Met Council's agenda, which is higher density, mass transit, more bike lanes and all that nonsense. And so And again, every city has to be the same. No city can have its own identity. No city is smart enough to decide how many units of housing they want. I mean, and it's also, these plans are regardless of what the people desire, because the people don't have a say in these plans. They'll tell you they do. I'm here to tell you they don't. Because what happens is cities create what's called a steering committee.
Yeah.
Or they might call it they have other words for it. It's escaping me right now. A task force.
Oh, yes.
They'll put something, Crystal did this in 2007. But the task force is deceiving, because it will start with council members, city staff,
Yeah.
people on commissions,
Yep.
and they will always outnumber the average citizen that they put on there.
Right. They
And
put a token citizen or
Right.
two on there.
Right, and the
it's- yeah.
steering committee is to get a predetermined outcome. They want it to go in a certain direction, so they steer
Yes.
it in a certain direction. We went through this in our local school district. District 281 had a divestiture committee to get rid of their unused properties, which 4 years later, there's some of them they're still hanging on to, Pilgrim Lane. But they loaded the committee with people in local government, staff members, board members, and then there was, I believe, 9 citizens out of 23. And of course, they chose the citizens. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is it a wonder that they came up with ideas to sell to a city to put up Kavanaugh old folks home or whatever it's going to be? Is it a wonder that they won't sell to a charter school, to let a charter school, because the outcome was predetermined?
Yeah.
And so it has this guise, and you'll be able to comment on these things after the plans are created. They'll create the plan, then we'll have a, quote, open house where you can submit comments in writing,
Yes.
but it's really void. They should hold everything before they go off to plan if they really wanted, our input.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way that it works. I mean, recently, Andrew and I went out to Hutchinson, Minnesota. We
You got to bring that up.
I do, yeah. We tore through their comprehensive plan, and it was one of the worst things either of us have ever seen.
I'll tell you, put it to you this way. If somebody's an alcoholic, don't look at the comprehensive plan of Hutchinson. You'll relapse.
But I tell you this, I mean, you're so frustrated by page 02 that, you don't want to read the rest of it. But then on the last page of this thing, 132 pages in, they stick this little graph. And it talks about, like, this is specific to the comprehensive plan, but this is really the way it works with anything.
The process.
The process. Where first you decide what needs to change. You locate the areas that need to be amended. And then secondly, you create findings of fact that justify the amendment. So you don't go find the facts and figure out if it works. You create facts.
Yeah,
Create findings.
You create findings that back up your predetermined action.
Absolutely. And then after you have these, I'm putting up air quotes here,
Yeah,
facts. After you have those facts, you go and hold a public hearing to formally approve the amendment. So people get to speak after the decision has already been made. I mean, that's the way that this works. They hold these meetings, and they're not really behind closed doors, but they might as well be, because there's no coverage from cable TV. There's no video up on the websites. So all the work happens in what are called work sessions. You go to the work session, you find out what happens, but you don't get to speak. You get to speak when you're in front of the whole council after they've already come to a consensus on what they want to do. And that's why you get so many unanimous votes in a city council, because they already have hashed out all of their differences. And
They've come up with
Yeah.
a solution they can all live with. And, that's a good transition into, we're at the time of the year where city budgets are being talked about.
Yes,
and
they
approved.
are.
And we should give a little background information on this. Your cities, and it's the same thing with the counties, are required by state law to set a preliminary budget for the following year in September of said year. So by, I think it's the second meeting is September 20th or something.
Yes.
They have to set a preliminary budget. So your cities, your counties, they've already done this. They've already set a preliminary budget for the next year. Now, after the preliminary budget is set, they will not set a final levy until December.
Right.
But they have to set a preliminary, and the preliminary is a maximum that they can spend. Now, it's with an asterisk because the budget's not all they spend.
Yes.
We'll talk about that. But this work has already happened. And it's a great example of what goes on behind closed doors. Not exactly behind, but like you said, they might as well be. Why they can't talk about the budget at a council meeting, I'm still lost on. Why they can't just keep the cameras rolling and have it work, I don't get that. I think it's just so makes it harder and harder for you to see what's going on. But they'll have 20 meetings. I mean, we live in Crystal. There'll be 20 meetings on the budget.
Oh, yeah.
And the first time you get to address the city council on said budget for next year will be after you get your bill. Because in November, the preliminary bills will go out for next year, and then you get to talk to them in December, but they've already done the work. Because they start budget talks in July, I want to say, late July, early August.
Yeah.
So they've already done the work. They're not going to go back and redo everything. Craig, come on.
No.
Man. I mean,
it's just the stuff that they disagree on that they have yet to hash out.
yeah. I mean, and let me transition this a little bit. A term you'll hear when you deal with local government, and you've probably heard it reading the news, is something called local government aid. LGA is the acronym. And LGA was created in 1971. It's technically called the Fiscal Disparities Act. It's sometimes referred to as the Minnesota Miracle. It's what, it is.
Yeah.
It's what we largely still use this. Now, we've tweaked the formula a few times, but the premise behind it is that cities, some cities don't have the tax base to pay for everything they need or want, I'm not sure which, at a local level. So this money gets sent to St. Paul. They put it in a formula that you have to hire a tax auditor to understand, and it gets spit out back to cities. So it's redistribution of wealth. I mean, in other words, it's a program of socialism. We don't call it that, but that's what it is. Now, LGA has been frozen, sort of on the chopping block.
Yeah.
It's something that at the Capitol, because the Capitol is things like education, which is mandated in our Constitution, and transportation are just higher priorities. I mean, they just are than giving taxpayer dollars to local government. Well, in the last session, 2013, where we got massive tax increases, a lot of that money is going back out in local government aid. Now, it's under the guise that if they're getting more, quote, free money from St. Paul, you, the taxpayer, will pay less in your property taxes. Now, I'm here to tell you, not only is that not going to happen, but cities are basically openly telling you it's not going to.
Right. And this is the other thing about LGA, that if you have, say, a bridge you want to build as a city, Andrew will be the city of, I don't know, somewhere good. That's
Minnetonka.
what. All right.
It's Lake Minnetonka got into my head.
All right. Andrew can be the city of Minnetonka, and say it costs $5 to build a new bridge across Grays Bay. $5 per person in Minnetonka. Okay, so the way that it should work is everybody in Minnetonka sends $5 to Andrew, and he builds the bridge. Now let's introduce me. I am the state of Minnesota. What I'm going to do is assess you $10 take out my filing fees and administrative costs and pay the pensions of the people working on it so that I can send $5 to Andrew so that Andrew can build the bridge to go across Grays Bay.
Right, and to the Minnetonka City Council, that's free money.
Yes.
That's we're not paying a nickel for that.
Right.
And there are things too. I mean, some roads are county roads. You know, there are little chinks in that. But the whole point is that it gets government so intertwined that you can't hold anybody accountable for anything. I mean, how do you hold somebody? And that's the whole problem with LGA. It takes away local accountability. These local people, and I'm not directing this at anyone in particular, but they always have the ability to blame somebody else.
Yes.
Well, we're not getting what was promised. We're not getting as much free money as we got last year, so
Right.
it's not our fault. They always have that out. Now, when you look around at these cities' preliminary levies, it's interesting to see how not 1 cent is going back to you in property tax relief. In fact, the mayor of Brooklyn Park, the alleged fiscal conservative who favors transit and public-private partnerships and all that, is in bed with Target, called local government aid a windfall profit in the paper. A windfall. So my tax money, like you said, how much money is lost by sending it to St. Paul and having them redistribute it?
Right.
Who knows? I mean, I don't even know if you can get a figure. But I'm going to pick on Crystal to start with. Okay? Crystal is receiving $188,000 more in local government aid in 2014 than they did in 2013. So you'd think the overall levy would decrease. Okay, maybe not the whole thing,
Right.
you know, because we have to have a balanced approach. Remember, that's one of the buzzwords.
Yeah.
Yet, the property tax levy is projected to increase $62,000. Now, why is it increasing when we're getting more free money from the state of Minnesota? Now, of course, they could still lower this, but, you know, it shouldn't even be up for debate to me to not be doing that. I mean, it's derelict of their duty to increase the levy at the same time they're getting more money from somebody else, because that's as much my tax dollars as anything else. Period.
Yes.
Now let's jump to the city that could screw up a one-car parade, New Hope. New Hope approved a 1.08% increase over 2013. Now, of course, you know, it's much smaller than the increase the previous year. So according to them, that's a cut.
That's a cut, yeah.
They received just, what is it? Where the heck is it? $42,000 in local government aid in 2013. They basically received nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically nothing in comparison to their overall budget. In 2014, they are planning to receive $532,000 in LGA, and they are going to spend every cent of it.
That's some windfall profits.
Right. I mean, they're going to $386,000 will be added to their water fund. Why?
They're thirsty.
Do they have a shortage of water there? I mean,
I'm thirsty.
Well,
I live pretty close.
yeah, I suppose.
So, but yeah, I mean, and they've got this whole brand new city center that they've got to build. And
How about Golden Valley with the roundabouts coming?
Oh,
Now let's
get
not
me
get off
started
on
on
that.
that.
Check out Robbinsdale. Listen to what they're going to use the money for. Oh, where the heck is it? Here it is. A variety of potential projects. I'm quoting the Sun Post, by the way, including updating the city website, include online registration for recreation programs, extra money for boulevard tree replacement, and a construction project on County Road 9. Now, folks, let me tell you something. LGA was supposed to cover expenses that are essential to local government, and that's, to me, police and fire.
Yep.
Now, how much we spend on those is debatable, but it's
Right.
totally legitimate to have a police and fire department.
Yep.
Water and sewer is totally legitimate.
Roads.
Roads, parks. I mean, those are, again, within reason.
Oh, yes.
But having some parks is you know, I
Yeah.
think it's good for a community. But anything beyond that, to me, is a want, not a need.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, City of Crystal, for example, their budget only spends, well, I shouldn't say only, but 42% of their money is spent on police and fire. That means 58% of their budget isn't.
Yeah.
The majority of their budget doesn't go to police and fire. So, you know, how much of that budget, I mean, is putting solar panels on the Crystal Pool, a building we use 9 weeks out of the year, that's essential. Planting trees on a boulevard is what local government aid money is going towards.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's to the point where it's like there's no debate between what is the role of government and what isn't.
Yeah.
You know, updating the city website? I mean, you know,
Better be a nice website.
you darn, we better talk to you and, you know, drive your car for you and do a whole bunch of other things. But I mean,
Yeah.
it really is incredible how your money is spent and how, you know, they
Yeah.
tell you there's nothing they can do, blah, blah, blah. Yet, at the same time, they're looking for things to spend your money on.
Oh, exactly. I mean, look at Hennepin County. They approved.
Do we have to?
Well, I know. I prefer not to, but I don't like to leave them be
That's
because
right. We've got to report the truth no matter
Yeah.
how bad it is.
they want to have about a 1% increase from their 2013 levy. It says here, looking at the LakerPioneer.com, that the 2014 maximum levy was set at $681.3 million, which is almost 1% higher, and it is lower than the 1.75% rate of inflation over the past 12 months. So they will call that a cut because it didn't keep up with inflation. So
Which, of course, they're entitled to.
right.
Well, does that include the new wheelage tax? That they doubled the wheelage tax? It's now, register a car in Hennepin County, you have to pay $10 instead of $5.
Yeah, no, that doesn't include that because it is just the property
Right.
tax
This is
levy.
not fees. This is not
Yeah.
state aid. I mean, when we talk about the $681 million, that's only about a little more than a third of what the county actually spends. And then you add to it, you know, one of the things we should mention is that the city budget really is not the be-all, end-all of what a city spends.
Right.
You have to look at something called their comprehensive annual financial report to really get that, because that's where you find, I mean, I'll use Crystal as an example, I'll keep picking on them. That's where you find special assessments.
Yep.
That's where you find all the info on their Economic Development Authority, which, by the way, is a separate levy. That is levied separate. Same thing in Hennepin County. They have a railroad authority. They have a housing authority. Your property taxes, my friends, go 10 different places.
Yeah.
You have your watershed.
Yep.
You have the Park District,
Metro Council.
Metro Council, and then you have the school districts have 2 levies. They have
Yep.
an operating budget, and they have a budget for upkeep on buildings. Those two, a capital budget. Those two things are separate. In Hennepin County and your cities will all have 3. Hennepin County will have 3. The city will have 2. EDA, and which are remarkably similar to the city council.
Yeah.
In makeup. Somebody else gets the gavel, but yeah. So, you know, that's another thing that's deceptive when you hear about these budgets or you see them written about, is that it's not like, okay, Crystal has, what, a $12 million budget? That's not all they're spending.
No, that's not all they're
that's-
spending because it goes back and forth every year. You in one year will figure out how much you need to take in taxes, and the next it's a bonding year. And with bonding, you're figuring out how much you want to borrow for the future, not how much you want to spend right away. So you go into debt temporarily, and
Based
then
on-
you take it back in taxes over the long haul.
Right, and that's another thing you'll find in comprehensive plans is what's called a TIF district, tax increment financing,
Yeah.
which works very similar to what you're saying, that the government takes out a debt and they leverage that against future gains. Now, look, first let me say, bonding's not the most evil thing in the world. Think about it in your house, okay? The car breaks down in the middle of nowhere. You might need your credit card to get a tow truck or get the car fixed.
Right.
But if you're putting the rent on the credit card, if you're putting
That's a
groceries
problem.
on the credit card, that's probably not good. So a certain small amount of bonding is understandable. There may be circumstances where we need to do something
Yeah.
and don't have the money. A bridge is going to fall apart.
A water main breaks in Robbinsdale.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, those circumstances do exist.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that we have to do at the local level. We need to do it at the state level. We need to set a maximum for what we can bond. And it's a real problem at the state level, because the state level bonding is all about special favors. It's all about this legislator wheeling and dealing with this committee. Hey, you fix my bridge up in International Falls. I'll vote for the Mayo Clinic down in Rochester. Civic centers are getting money, and these things that don't have a statewide value. And it's very tempting to just bond something and leverage that against future gains. But like we said, too much of that is not a good thing ever. It's just like owing 20 grand on the credit card when you're making 35 a year is not a good thing.
Right, and we still have to pay for it. It comes out of our pockets, whether it's now or later. So it's an excuse to spend more money than we should.
Well, it's an excuse too to say, well, we have something we want to do, we don't have the money, but here's this alternate way of paying for it. We should mention too that these early December, these groups are required, cities of 500 residents or more, so townships don't count, are required to hold the taxation hearings. They usually happen. Check your city council's website. It's usually the first week in December, which is it's Monday in New Hope. It's Tuesday in Robbinsdale, Golden Valley, and Crystal. To hold the truth and taxation hearing, they do not have to decide on a budget that night. They can delay it. That's happened before. Happened once in Crystal in the last couple of years, 2010, where they delayed it until but by their second meeting in December, they have to pass, by law, they have to pass a budget for the following year. So I know it's not much, and I know it's after they've already talked about it a lot, but you got to go there. And even if the councils don't change a whole lot, you got to let them know you're unhappy. And if you can't make it, send an email, make a phone call, send the email to everybody. Don't just send it to the person who represents you. Everybody needs to see on that council, because they all get a vote. I mean, just because your council person might not vote for it, 4 votes in Crystal anyway. Sometimes it's 3 in some other cities. They all have to approve this, so you want everybody to see your opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, you might have 1 or 2 people that are against it, and you might be able to convince one person to change their mind. It has happened. And it is important to let them know what you think. I mean, whether they change their mind or not, you at least need to put them on notice that you are watching. And when we're moving into an electoral year, well, I mean, every year, I guess, is an electoral year. We're just finishing up today with elections in Golden Valley and Minneapolis and Hopkins and St. Louis Park. But when we're moving into a major electoral year, or even year elections, you have the greatest chance of affecting the most votes, because they get scared if they think they're going to lose their job.
They do, and sometimes they get vicious if they think they're going to lose their job.
Oh, that does happen. I'm living proof of that.
I think I am too.
Been on the receiving end of that, a tongue lashing more than once.
Yeah, you're just full of rhetoric,
Yeah.
Yeah, so, get out there and study that, and ask questions. If you don't understand something, you can email city staff. They will get back to you. As much as, I don't think highly of everybody on city staff in certain cities. It's their job to communicate this, explain this. I would suggest talking to, every city around here has a finance person. That they will usually make the presentation at a council meeting. Same thing with the comprehensive annual financial report. And study those things. And, most cities have it broken down pretty well. They are hard to understand.
Yes.
I mean, and I think it's deliberately that way, so us peons can't figure things out. There are transparency laws that they have to follow, and That's just a whole other issue. But and study that comprehensive annual financial report, because you'll find things in there. One thing that you'll find in there, I know Crystals takes the levy back to 2000.
Yes.
In their comprehensive annual, so you can see where we were and where we've gotten to.
Yeah.
And I know in Crystal the levy has more than doubled.
Oh, yes,
in the
it
past.
has. Plus, you'll also be able to see over a period of at least 3 years how much, well, 2 to 3, it depends on the comprehensive annual financial report, how much they have spent in these different buckets.
Yeah.
And you've got like your capital bucket, your capital assets, your investments,
Yeah.
and you're able to see, okay, how much are they
Property
putting
buying,
in property buying,
the total
Yeah.
value of
Yeah.
the EDA.
How much they spend on water and lights, and maybe you'll find things like, hey, my city seems to be taking more in on water than they're spending.
What
Why
city
is
would that be?
That would be Crystal.
Oh, yeah. Why don't they lower my bill then?
Yeah, well, when's the last time that government has lowered anything?
Well, and it's a good it's a good example of so many things like electricity, water, all our utilities are. The reason they never go down in cost is because we don't have freedom of choice.
Right.
I mean, we have no freedom of choice on any of that.
And you might say, well, electricity, it all runs on the same wires. You can only have one company. Well, let's say some genius comes up with a way to harness the power of the sun, or
The flux capacitor.
something, some sort of mini nuclear fusion.
It could happen.
It could happen where it could be safe and it could be energy efficient, and all of a sudden the government can be like, hey, we own this.
Right.
That's why, like with the garbage hauling and electricity and some of these things they don't own, they're trying to at least monopolize it so that they can control it if they don't own it.
Well, it's just, when you monopolize something, the cost will never, ever go down. It's just a simple law of economics. If you have one provider, that provider has no incentive. The market isn't setting the price.
No.
It's controls somewhere that are setting the price. And they also discourage things like private wells, capping of private wells.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a private solution to a water shortage.
Yes.
It's a solution to any kind of water problem, is untapping our wells, and they make that as difficult to do as possible. There are permits, rules, regulations, there's environmental standards, there's all sorts of things that make that not even worth doing.
Yeah.
But just think, if X amount of people were able to provide their own water to themselves,
Yeah.
why is that something that's frowned upon?
Because it's not controlled.
Yeah, well, I mean, you think when Lewis and Clark went out west, they bought a fishing license, and well, I mean, it's just I don't understand this idea that we're all so helpless that we can't survive without government, dictating all these things. Are we really that Are you that helpless?
No, and here's the other piece of it. We are guaranteed a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to eat food, okay, because it keeps you alive. You have a right to drink water because it keeps you alive. But if you don't buy the government water, if you don't get a hunting license, or AKA permission from the government,
or sell food that's FDA approved. Remember, everything's got to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration.
Right. And we've seen a number of cities where city councils are cracking down on people that grow food in their own gardens. And even in this city and others around the metro, they control where you can have a garden. So by default, with lot sizes, it controls how big your garden can be.
Yes.
A lot of them, you can't grow food in the front of your house, or,
And we should say, too, I mean, one thing I will say, a certain amount of city codes are necessary.
Absolutely, or you have sheer chaos.
Right.
Yeah.
But take a look at your city code sometime. We've studied crystals extensively. It's over 600 pages long, folks.
Yes.
All for a city of 22,000 people. I mean, who are we? We're a suburb. We're a pimple on on somebody's, back, I guess is what we are. I mean, why does it take that? And a lot of codes aren't enforced, and we couldn't possibly enforce them all anyway. It's
Right.
We need to be a police state to do that. So it's, in these cities, they don't go over this stuff. They don't go over the city code. Your city code, you call up the city of Crystal, they don't know what's in it.
Right?
I mean, I don't know. We'll get back to you.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine who wanted to seal his driveway.
Yeah.
He called me because he thought I would know, and I'm like, well, he wanted to know if he needed a permit to do it, and I'm like, I would just do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not advocating law breaking, but I mean, like anybody's going to come along. What are you going to have? The environmental police come along and no, you can't have your driveway looking nice.
Yeah.
No, that's against. But I mean, there's other things in your city codes too. If you want to make improvements on your house, technically you have to pay the city to do it.
Or say you want to earn a living from your house. I know in this city, you're only allowed to have one customer at a time.
Yeah.
Anybody that works for you has to live with you. And your sign size is regulated. Your hours of operation are regulated. Now, granted, you don't want somebody using a chainsaw, making chainsaw art at 10:30 at night out in their backyard.
But there's already an ordinance for that. There's
Right.
already a noise ordinance.
Right.
You don't need to create a new law to do that.
Yep. If you run a home massage business, you have got to pay for the detectives to come and do a thorough investigation of you, and then you've got to pay for a license yearly on top of that.
Yeah, and that's on top of all your federal tax ID number,
Yeah.
your state. You have to get a license.
Yeah.
You're already a licensed business.
We already have laws against prostitution in Minnesota. So if somebody is engaging in behavior that's unbecoming of a upstanding business person,
Naughty.
there's a law to send you to jail for that. But yet you have to pay on the front end to prove you're a good person in order to engage in a business so that you can afford to eat, live, etc., etc.
Yeah, and if you run your own business, aren't you traveling less miles, less vehicle miles traveled? They should make it easier to do that.
Right?
People don't drive to work.
It's just like, if you're growing your own food or raising your own chickens, I mean, aren't you coming up with a green solution?
Right.
Instead
And think about how absurd it is that you can only employ people who live with you. For example, if I wanted to start my own home-based business, now my sister, she does accounting, payroll, she does that for a living.
Yeah.
I wanted to hire her
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that her, my brother-in-law, my two nephews, and their dog have to move into my house?
Well, I mean, it depends. With an accountant, maybe is a bad example
Yeah.
because she could do that from her house.
Yeah, I suppose.
But if you had someone coming to your house every day to work with you and taking up room on the street with parking
Right,
and
if
everything,
I had an office at my house or something.
yeah.
So if you were a lawyer and you had a legal assistant,
Yep.
for example, you'd have to rent
Yeah.
office space
Yeah.
legally to run that.
Right.
I mean, just what? Can I ask a question here? What business is it of the city of Crystal if I'm running a business out of my home that is legal?
It's none.
And it also brings up, we talk about. You just got me to thinking about enforcing state law,
Yeah.
which is really not the job of the local government.
No.
I mean, we had the thing that amazed me. It was New Hope hired. Well, this is a twofold story. New Hope hired a police officer last spring, or they were thinking about it, and they were talking about how the position will generate its own revenue. And I'm going, what does that tell you?
boy.
It tells you that there's going to be more parking tickets, more code enforcement
Yeah.
tickets. They're going to go after the law-abiding citizen. Now, you look at something like Click It or Ticket,
Yep.
a state law,
Mm-hmm.
seatbelt law,
Yeah.
that local governments are out there trying to enforce, which they don't have to.
Yeah, nothing bothers me more than those state trooper commercials that they pay tax money to put on TV in very expensive time slots
Yeah.
at certain times a year to say, you better be afraid of us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, are you not there to protect and serve, or are you there to make us scared? And
They are public servants.
because Crystal did it too. I mean, what was it? Before Mayor Adams was put into office, they hired they weren't as sly about the way they stated it as New Hope, but they hired a traffic cop, and they were very out about that. We hired a new traffic cop and bought an unmarked police car, and we're going to use at our expense, and we're going to use that to, put the fear into who are maybe otherwise, law-abiding citizens who might just happen to not be watching their speed or whatever. I think if somebody's literally, speeding and they're endangering people, I mean, I live across from the new medical center, and I got people speeding by here all the time. But you know what?
How often do you see a police car out here?
Oh, never.
Never.
They're not here. They're out on 81 watching for somebody that's going 6 or 7 miles over the speed limit.
Right. They're going after what's easy to get.
Right. And so it takes, I think, a different approach.
Well, I think the approach is that you can't. A police officer is a public servant. They're not there to generate revenue.
Right.
They're not there to pay for themselves. I, as a taxpayer, am willing to pay a certain amount of police officers to enforce local law.
Absolutely.
Okay? But I am not willing to pay for somebody to literally go after people who are not wearing their seatbelt, but they're not. I mean, that puts themselves in danger.
Yeah.
But it doesn't put a pedestrian in danger.
No.
It doesn't put, I mean, if they're choosing to do that, I mean, I disagree with seatbelt laws, period.
I do too.
I mean, I just think that we got more important things to worry about. It's your personal choice. I mean, we drove without seatbelts for decades, and it's stupid. You should wear it.
Yeah.
But, if you don't, I mean, you're the one that bears the consequences of it. And there's other things they're going after, too. Teenagers. Minnesota passed a law that only one other teenager can be in a car with. So they're driving around looking for teenagers. Mm-hmm. Somebody's robbing a bank on the other side of town, and they're too busy handing out a teenager ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, and granted, I'm exaggerating that a little bit, but we got to understand that there's real criminals out there, and there's citizens out there that get lazy once in a while. And it doesn't make me feel safe to know that there's a cop out there in New Hope trying to generate revenue by handing out tickets.
And how many times have you passed a traffic stop recently where there's 2, 3, maybe even 4 police vehicles? Really, is that how many police officers it takes to be able to pull one person over?
I don't know. Unless that person's got a warrant out for their arrest, it's absurd.
I mean, exactly. In that case, you want the officer to be safe, but.
Right, but there's always, you can always call for backup. You can always call another city. They're always willing to come.
Yeah.
We have county officers. We have state troopers. There's not a shortage of police officers. But it goes back to an issue of that we haven't touched on a lot, and it's the constitutional sheriff.
Right.
That issue of, if we're ever going to get local control of something, it's up to us, and that's an elected position. Mm-hmm. It's up to us to find that person who is not going to take the money to buy a big tank for Hennepin County like our current sheriff has done, or whatever, the big Humvee or whatever. I mean, I don't know what a police department would use that for. That's for the military. It's for a bomb squad. It's I don't know why they would need something like that. And that's another thing that worries me is the militarization of the police departments. Your police departments are learning things and that really aren't what is in their. I mean, I think of like the Dukes of Hazzard or something. Where, we got Roscoe out there. Was he trained in the military to go out there and I mean, I think of that as like your local police department. They handle petty matters and. But now they're getting training that I don't understand how that's. I don't understand how that pertains to what they're supposed to do.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, not with all, of course.
Yeah,
I mean, my brother's a police officer, but it seems like it's cool to look like Darth Vader.
Yeah.
It's cool to tase people. It's cool to intimidate people, and that to me doesn't say protect and serve. That says to me, we've got laws and you're going to follow them, buddy.
Well, it tells me too. We've got the power,
Yeah.
You know, we're the ones with the power, and like you said, you know, you're gonna do what we say, and we're gonna intimidate you to do it. I mean, it's just, I think we've just lost what it means to become a public servant, and we've lost that at all levels of government. We've lost that in our cities, our counties. That serving the public is, you know, you hear a lot of rhetoric about that when you're campaigning. You know, oh, I love my neighborhood, and I don't know what happens to people when they get in office, but somehow the reasons that they ran in the first place slowly delude them over time.
I think it's a little bit that, but I also think it, like you said at the very beginning of this podcast, that they don't do the necessary homework to understand what's really happening. That when they receive LGA, that they're being bought off because there's a string attached to that. That when they allow green steps to come into their cities, that they're not just replacing light bulbs, but they're actually putting a framework in place to make major changes to parking and driving and biking and housing. And so I think that's where a lot of this comes from.
And I agree with that. And I think when you talk about things about local governments joining groups, you know, how many times have we pointed out how many groups these people join?
Yeah.
Whether that's League of Minnesota Cities, Association of Metropolitan Municipalities, Green Step, Active Living, Mayors Associations. Now, there are a small number of benefits that come with that, but for the most part, it comes with expectations that you are going to do something. If you join an Active Living campaign put out by the county or who, I mean, they all say the same thing. We want to get people out of their car, out of their house, get them to walk and bike, which nothing is preventing them from doing. You can walk down your street, and I don't know who's stopping you, but it's all about, you know, Complete Streets, putting, you know, that's a great example.
Yeah.
Complete Streets Minnesota, which is, of course, has a national group from smartgrowth.org, and that is this campaign to get bike lanes and sidewalks in every street, basically make it so that it's harder to drive on.
Yeah.
Now, you can look at that and say, well, there are some streets where a sidewalk is necessary.
Yeah.
I don't see anywhere where bike travel is to the point where it's necessary. So why are they doing it? They're doing it to get you to do it. But once you have a Complete Streets policy, you are expected to do certain things. Once you join Green Step, you don't have to, but of course we know how the government works. You know, they will try to get you to do it.
Well, when they tried to pass this in Crystal till we showed up and they were unsuccessful.
Oh boy, what a night. Oh, what a night. You could
I could sit
that.
and relive that. Hold on a second. I'm just thinking about that.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy. All right. So
We relive our speeches. We won't go any further than that.
anyways, we went in there, and the Crystal government, I mean, basically told us that there's a lot, well, no, they did tell us, there's a lot of peer pressure to conform to these once you do it. I mean, something is expected of you.
Yes.
So, I mean, this isn't us just supposing. It's true. It is.
Well, and first off, if you want to do some things that are quote-unquote green, and I would remind people that green ideas fail every day, and none of them stand the test of the marketplace. I mean, again, if people really wanted to go green, and going green was economical, it would happen. The free market would make it happen.
And I think it does in some ways.
It does in some ways, absolutely. But
we talk about gardens and
right.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you know, trying to get us to change light bulbs or trying to get us to buy us the Chevy Volt or something like that, the technology is not there to where the average person, you know, it's like the car when it first came out.
Yeah.
Henry Ford had to create the assembly line. Why? The average person couldn't afford to buy his product.
Yeah.
So
it takes time.
Yeah, it does, and some of those ideas might work in the long run, but when it comes to something like Green Step, it's like, okay, wait a minute. When you join something like, and you should have seen. I mean, if I could show people the little fancy brochure the Crystal City Council got for it gave nothing of detail. You go to Greenstep's website. I can't think of it off the top of my head. Just Google Minnesota Green Step cities and you'll find it. There were 28 best practices.
Yep.
There were over 100 proposed ordinances.
Yep.
There was everything from demand level planning to forced carpooling to. Now you might say, well, we don't have to do that. Well, no, but when you join something, why would you join something if you don't intend
Yeah.
to do? If I, the example we gave was season tickets to the Twins,
Yeah.
which I wouldn't take if they need a new GM for me to do that. But I mean, if I bought season tickets, would you not assume that I'm going to go to some of the games?
Yeah.
So why is it when the government joins a program, why aren't I to take from that? We are blessing this program.
Yeah.
We are saying it's the right direction to head in, and these things, maybe not all of them,
Yeah.
but a chunk of these things are what the direction we're going to head. Why is that unreasonable for me to assume that?
No, and they have to believe it. I mean, they would never choose to join something that they didn't already believe in. Say, I'm a Vikings fan. Why would I join the Green Bay Packers fan club? Right? So,
You're the infiltrator. Would be the only reason.
but yeah, why? So why would you join a Green Step program if you have no intention of following the specifics of the program?
Well, and I think listening to the council, the ignorance was amazing. How little they actually knew about what was in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's a good example of where city staff was really steering what was going on. Our city engineer is a global warming freak. He, I'm sure, went to a workshop, that was put on by them or the Met Council and basically said, well, I mean, he accosted us in the hallway telling us to quit watching Fox News. I had to tell him I don't have cable.
Yeah.
So
Neither do I.
He's just a sellout to that, and he's the one who, did the little 2-page thing that, and that's something too. You got to city staff members have an agenda, and how many city council people, are going to sift through that and ask the right questions. I mean, Crystal basically talked about this for 5 minutes at a work session, and then it was on the next agenda for the next council meeting. Now, luckily, we had some members who, whoa, time out here. This is bigger than we thought. And one thing you got to do, too, you got to educate the people in office. I mean, I'm here to tell you that not everybody in office knows every detail about every... I don't.
Right.
Okay, so you've got to tell them, hey, I looked into this, here's what I found.
Yeah, and I give those guys tons of credit on that council that felt that check and went, hey, this doesn't feel right. I need to learn more, and actually change their mind. That doesn't happen often.
And one of them was an outgoing... Janet Moore was an outgoing... She did not run for another term.
Nope.
She could have just said, well, I'll vote for it. I'm not going to be here.
And another one was the mayor's soon-to-be husband,
Right.
or was husband at the time.
Absolutely. And I don't know why he voted. He was very quiet up there. I don't know why he voted no. I'm sure he slept on the couch, but Joe's a guy I don't agree with hardly ever, but I mean, he was pretty much the deciding. He'd have voted yes, it would have passed.
Yeah.
And so, and it's a great example too of. He's a good example too of where you never know where you're going to find agreement with these people. You might disagree with them on federal issues or something like that, but you never know. In your neighborhood, if somebody says, look, we just... And I'd like to clear up something about Green Step. We spent a year getting attacked for this, and I want to clear up something. Our group never asked for this measure to be defeated.
Nope.
I want to say that straight out. We asked for it to be delayed.
Tabled.
Yes. I mean, we had 3 new council people coming in. I mean, there were a lot of reasons. I don't like it when things like this are passed in the lame duck period. It tells me that somebody, I won't say who, is trying to push this in on their way out, so to speak. And so it just tells me that, I kind of lost my train of thought there. But things like that, we asked for it. Oh, I remember now. We asked for it to be tabled so we could get more information. They insisted on voting on it.
Yeah.
So, if the former mayor wants to get mad at me or you for it not passing and basically proceeded to threaten us, I would argue,
Yeah.
accused us of hijacking the process, which I'm still trying to understand how anybody above like 5 years old could think citizens who don't have a vote on something could hijack the process. But, she's got no further to look than the people around her,
Yeah.
the council around her. I can go and complain. I don't get a vote.
Yeah.
We have a representative republic. Somebody
Yep.
votes for me. So, it's just, we never asked for that measure to be defeated. And there are things in there. We talked about growing local foods,
Yeah.
having a farmer's market. Chickens was part of that.
Yeah.
There are things that could be useful, but I would argue we don't have to join a group
Yeah.
to make those things. We just made chickens legal in Crystal.
Yeah.
We didn't have to join Green Step to do it.
Nope, we did not.
So,
So yeah, as you see, we've got a lot of stuff on our minds.
Yeah.
And so we hope to make this a very regular feature. Hopefully you were able to follow us, and we've got a lot more coming on transit-oriented development, green steps,
Thrive 2040,
Thrive
baby.
2040. Ooh, boy. That's some good stuff right there. So we also hope to have some guests with us to kind of explain what they're doing in their cities.
But no matter what, they
yeah.
won't get more words in than we do.
No.
Yeah.
No. That's hard to beat. So, we already went 16 minutes over what we were planning on doing.
Oh,
and
well.
See how this goes? This is...
We got a lot to say, folks.
we
It's
do.
hard to be. We're like life. Life can't be contained.
No.
Okay, it always grows and multiplies. That's what we are. We are growing and multiplying here at Community Solutions Minnesota. No
It's
question
true.
about
It's
it.
true. So I just want to say, if you are finding some of these things in your city, or you have questions about what's going on, and you're not quite sure how something works, we would love to get together with you, whether it's one person or getting a group of people together and having us come speak to you. We would love the opportunity to come do that. You can come visit our blog at www.communitysolutionsmn.wordpress.com. You can also email us, and you can do that straight out of the website, or you can get a hold of us at...
Was it ComSolutionsMN
Yeah.
at gmail.com?
yes, it is. COMM solutionsmn at gmail.com.
Also, just to mention, too, we do have a Facebook group. If you are interested in that, you can just go to Facebook, look up groups, Community Solutions Minnesota. We are on there. You'll see me, you'll see Jason on there. And, it's sort of the Facebook page is sort of a discussion area. Anybody can post who's part of the group. We do link to the blog, but there's some interesting ideas, and we do post council meeting minutes and things like that. So it's a useful area for people to kind of just talk casually,
Yeah.
maybe about these things.
Absolutely. And we've also been doing some forum speaking. So if you guys are having a forum on something and want us to bring in a little different perspective that you're going to hear from a lot of other people. We were just out speaking about the Gateway Corridor out in Woodbury. We were out in Hutchinson with their redevelopment plan.
We did a forum here last spring
Yeah, we
in
did.
Botno.
Yes, we did. Andrew was out at the Rally for the Constitution last Sunday.
Great.
So
It was very windy. It was
Yeah.
much better, though, than watching the Vikings lose again.
yes,
I'll
it was.
admit I TiVoed it, but so
Just delay your disappointment.
well,
a bit.
I can run through it in an hour. I don't have to
Yeah.
watch the same Fox commercials over and over and over.
So, anyways, we're moving into a lot of different areas here. Next year, we'll be doing some candidate training and things like that. So, it pays for you to pay attention to what's going on here at Community Solutions Minnesota, because we're taking a bold step forward, and we hope that you guys are going to meet us out on that battlefield of ideas, and that we're going to be able to come out victors in this, a more free people, a more knowledgeable people than we are today. and that we're going to see positive change happen around us.
Independent people. People
Yes.
deciding their own lives, being independent, free of government, at the local level and beyond. I mean, it starts here. The American Revolution didn't start in London. It started with people in their homes, in their huts back at that time, saying this action's wrong,
Yeah.
and we're going to organize to change it. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way we'll have any say-so with the Met Council is putting up a barrier at City Hall. And then we go to the county level, and then we go to the state level. And that's how you have multiple layers of resistance to what's happening around us.
in worst case scenario, we buy our own island. That'll be the worst case scenario. Imagine how much freedom and liberty we
like
have.
Big Island?
Yeah. Well, there's an island out on a lake up north. I think I'm going to take over.
Okay.
I think that'd be my 650 square feet of living that the Met Council wants me to have.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we better wrap this up
Yep.
before we digress into stuff you really don't care about. So, keep an eye out. We're going to be doing these regularly and posting them to our blog. And maybe if you're tuning in there, you'll see some fun comments from mayors and council representatives on how they disagree with us in the comments.
Oh, there's
Already a lot of that.
yeah, there's a few, just a couple.
So we're making waves, and we want you to help make waves with us. Signing off, I am Jason Bradley.
And I'm Andrew Victor for Community Solutions Podcast Radio Show.
Episode 1 in the can.
Yes, and on our way to the future Community Solutions.